Okay, now we move on to our gospel from Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 through 12. When Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of King Herod, behold, Magi from the east arrived in Jerusalem, saying, "Where is the newborn King of the Jews? We saw his star at its rising and have come to do him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was greatly troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. Assembling all the chief priests and the scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. They said to him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for thus it has been written through the prophet, and you, Bethlehem, land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, since from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly and ascertained from them the time of the star's appearance. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search diligently for the child. When you have found him, bring me word, that I too may go and do him homage." After their audience with the king, they set out, and behold, the star that they had seen at its rising preceded them, until it came and stopped over the place where the child was. They were overjoyed at seeing the star, and on entering the house they saw the child with Mary his mother. They prostrated themselves and did him homage. Then they opened their treasures and offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed for their country by another way. Okay, great. So this is obviously a very popular scene that takes place. And there's something, I mentioned this last week, there's something strange about it because our gospel passage last week flowed immediately after this one. So we're kind of going in reverse order here. The flight into Egypt is what we heard last week in the Holy Family, for the Feast of the Holy Family. And now this week we have the visit of the Magi, when really we probably should have, done the opposite of what we're doing. But, this is how the church year works. It's fun, and we all have the gift of Bibles. Hopefully we have the gift of Bibles. And if we don't, we clearly have the gift of the internet. So we can go online and read the Bible in one sitting if we want to. That would take a very long time, but you can certainly read, the gospel in order, so you don't have to worry about. Again, the purpose of this Bible study is so that when we get to Sunday Mass, we don't have to worry about things being in just the right place, in just the right order, because we have taken time apart from Sunday Mass to study and to get things in their right order according to what's actually there. So here's yet another reason for this great Bible study. What a gift. Okay, so Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea. So Bethlehem is the house of David, which is significant because Jesus, from the beginning of Matthew, so I talked about this, the fourth Sunday of Advent, Jesus, at the beginning of the Gospel of Matthew, is revealed to be in the line of Abraham, in the line of David, and so he's in this line of kingship, and he's in it because of Joseph adopting him, so that's like a really important thing. So he's really like in the line of being the king. So being a descendant of David is a significant thing, and so then being born in the city of David is also significant, that he's from Judah, as this prophecy from Micah chapter 5 reveals, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for thus it has been written, you, Bethlehem, land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, since from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people Israel." That's, again, significant that this prophecy is fulfilled in some ways, seemingly by accident. We read from the Gospel of Luke that they went to Bethlehem only because the pagan governor, the Roman governor, called for a census, and so everyone had to go back to their hometowns. If that wasn't the case, if this Gentile non-believer hadn't done whatever he wanted to do, which was to call for a census, if he hadn't done that, Jesus maybe would probably not have been born in Bethlehem. But because of that, he ends up being born in the city of David, which is also the city of Joseph. Significant. So the word Bethlehem, bet lechem, so lechem is bread, and bet is house. So if you ever hear of like a church, a non-denominational church, or there's like a band called Bethel, so Bet El, El is God, Bet is house, so house of God. So Bethlehem is house of bread, which again is significant because Jesus in the Gospel of John reveals himself to be what? The bread of life. So again, just a really I think it's incredible. I think it's obviously very neat. I'm thinking you think so too, but whatever. So here he is being born in the house of bread, he who is the bread of life, who will give his flesh to us to eat, to feast upon in the Holy Eucharist. Really cool. Okay, so he's born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of King Herod. So Herod, I think I'm pretty sure I mentioned this last week, but Herod was not a Jewish king. He was a king set up by the Roman Empire who didn't really care about the Jewish laws, but they did try to, keep as much peace, I suppose, in a sense, as they could. Again, probably a superficial type of peace. But nonetheless, so Herod is an Edomite, so he's from Edom, and he is half Jewish, we could say. So he's not a real Jewish king, and yet he's established as the King of the Jews. That's like a title that was given to him. And so when these magi come in, so these wise men from the east, from another direction, they come from far away. They arrive in Jerusalem and they're asking, where is the newborn King of the Jews? They're asking about the King of the Jews when really they should have been acknowledging, Herod, you are the King of the Jews. They, on the other hand, are like, where's the newborn King of the Jews? And so for Herod, who I mentioned last week, was already a very suspect person. Like he was so paranoid that he even had like his wife and some of his children killed because he was worried that they were going to try to take his throne from him. So now he's hearing about this newborn King of the Jews, and he is greatly troubled. And so it says, when Herod heard of this, he was greatly troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. So it's one of those things of like, oh no, someone came and upset the king, and they made him paranoid. And when the king is paranoid, things are chaotic and crazy, and that's not a good thing. And so it says Herod was greatly distressed, and all are greatly troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. What a really tragic figure this King Herod is. Okay, but we've got to go backwards. So it says, where's the newborn King of the Jews? We saw his star at its rising and have come to do him homage. So this actually is a reference. So maybe I'll mention this all year long because Matthew is so good at this. Matthew loves making references to Old Testament things, Old Testament prophecies, Old Testament events, whatever the case may be. And that's not to say that this didn't actually happen. I'm sure this actually happened. But Matthew is making sure to emphasize that it actually happened, to emphasize what was said. So when it makes reference to a star, there's a reference to the book of Numbers. So Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, the fourth book of the Bible, where this Balaam makes a prophecy. And in his prophecy, he talks about how a star is going to rise from the land of Judah. And what I found really interesting is, so this is in Numbers 24:17, and then in Numbers 24:18, it talks about how the Edomites are going to become defeated at the hands of this scepter that's going to rise from the land of Judah. So you can again imagine Herod, whether he's familiar with this or not, maybe he was familiar with it. And here he is hearing about this star that came from that came rising, and the result of this star is that the Edomites are going to be defeated. And Herod, who is an Edomite, perhaps is concerned about this. Perhaps we don't actually know, but what we do know is that there's this newborn king, and that newborn king is not Herod, and so he's clearly upset. Okay, anyways. So what does he do? He Herod assembles all the chief priests and the scribes of the people, and he inquires of them where the Christ was to be born. So this is like an important thing. So you hear about prophecy, and so what do? You don't go and talk to someone who doesn't know anything about the prophecy. He gets together the religious leaders. So he does, in some ways, like the right thing. Like, okay, where's this is taking place? Where do you see this in your scriptures? And so the chief priests and the scribes, they respond. They know. They're like, oh no, this is in Bethlehem, because they know their Bible. That's a really, interesting thing to point out. Would we be able to answer a question if someone asked us a question about the Bible? And to be sure, I don't think anyone here is saying that we need to be perfect, because these are chief priests and scribes. They give their life for it. So in some ways, maybe our religious leaders need to be really good at knowing their scriptures. At the same time, I think it's worth our wondering. They didn't have as easy of access to the scriptures as we do today. These guys knew the answer to this question. And not only the answer, they knew what passage to cite. From the book of Micah. Micah says, Bethlehem, land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. So they knew that Bethlehem was the answer, and they knew where that answer came from. I'm not trying to shame anyone. I'm just trying to say, this is yet another reason for a great Bible study like this, and for other Bible studies. This isn't the only one, obviously. There's plenty of really excellent Bible studies, way better Bible studies, actually, that we can all engage in. I only know about the Bible because I've engaged in Bible studies and have read it. So anyways, it's just really good. Okay, so then what happens? So then Herod hears about this. Okay, and he's like, okay, well, I gotta get them, and I gotta find a way to get them to go and find the child and come back and tell me, so that I can bring an end to this King of the Jews, as he's being called. And so he's what he calls them secretly. He tells them, go. He pretends to be interested, and then like, come back and I'll go and worship him. I'll go and take care of him. And so they don't know any differently. So they're like, okay, great, we're going to go. So they find the star. They find the place where the child was, and they were overjoyed at seeing the star, just simply at seeing the star. So you can think actually of our first reading, how the people are overjoyed at simply being in the presence of the radiant light of God's presence. They're just so delighted to be in the presence of, they're drawn by the radiance of God's presence. So just by seeing the star, they're overjoyed to see the star. And yet, then what happens? They enter the house where the child, where they saw the child with Mary, his mother. So this is an important point. They saw the house. So you think of nativity sets. What do you see? You see, Jesus in the manger, Mary and Joseph and the camels and the shepherds, and you also see the Magi. When, according to the biblical word, it sure seems to be the case that they have moved on from the manger. I mentioned this again last week, that it could have been the case that as much as 2 years had gone by between the birth of Jesus and the visit of the Magi. And we know this because Herod, after this whole scene takes place, when he realizes that the Magi aren't coming back, in a fit of rage, he has all of the boys killed 2 years old and younger. So it could be the case, actually, that a significant amount of time has passed from the birth of Jesus to the visit of the Magi. And so when we have our nativity sets with the Magi, showing up and this newborn baby, and it's like, well, maybe that's not actually how it should be. Maybe we should reset our nativity sets between Christmas and the Feast of the Nativity, or excuse me, the Feast of the Epiphany, so that Jesus is like in a house instead of in a manger. That would take a lot of extra work. But anyway, the point, just to me, it seems worth pointing out. I didn't always see this, and then someone pointed out to me, it's like, wow, that's really interesting that it's a house and not the manger or the stable that we're familiar with hearing about with the birth of Jesus. That was then. This is a different scene. Anyway, they prostrated themselves and did him homage. So the word there is proskuneo. They prostrated themselves. In the Gospel of Matthew, whenever Matthew talks about prostration, he's talking about worship. So they are worshiping this child Jesus. And then from there, they opened their treasures and offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Which, of course, gold and frankincense we hear spoken about in our first reading from Isaiah chapter 60. So that's like a neat thing. And then the myrrh, where does the myrrh come into play? Well, we know that myrrh, from the book of Exodus chapter 30, myrrh was an oil that was used to consecrate Levitical priests. So when the priests were consecrated to offer the sacrifices in the tabernacle in the desert, there was myrrh that was used to anoint them, as well as to anoint the entire tabernacle. So that's a significant thing. We also know from the Gospel of John, chapter 19, after Jesus dies, that they anoint his body with myrrh, that it was a burial ointment that was among different burial ointments that were being used. So myrrh is a significant thing. Okay, and like this is okay. So there's different saints who have mentioned different things about these gifts. So one saint mentions that the gold, of course, points to his royalty. The frankincense points to his divinity, like offering sacrifice, and the myrrh points to his humanity, the fact that he's going to die. Another person says that the gold is like the wisdom of Christ given to us, so it's like a gift given to us. The frankincense is a sign of our prayers and adoration that we give to God, and the myrrh is a sign of our daily self-sacrifices, so our daily acts of self-denial. However you want to look at this, there's other people who have different ideas about what these gifts symbolize. But the point is, again, just as we saw, that the wealth of the nations are going to be brought, and they're gonna give all of these gifts, and they're gonna proclaim the praises of the Lord. And this is exactly what is fulfilled in the person of Jesus. As like a little toddler, maybe a baby, but as a little toddler, he's being worshipped and honored, as Isaiah prophesied was going to take place when the divine presence comes to live among his people. So it's a real sign, a real revelation, an epiphany, that Jesus is, like, in him is the real divine presence that radiates and draws people to himself, so that they can then pour out their wealth, pour out their finest gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh. So good. Okay, so Paul's going to write about this to the letter to the Ephesians when we see this in our next reading. Okay, we'll see you soon. Peace.